Yep.
Now,
We are ready to go.
so Dr. Scott, would you like the honor of introducing Dr. Kelsey and Nathan?
Well, I don't know that, I do not know as much detail about Nathan other than, and but and therefore Nathan, I'm sorry. But I will certainly do Dr. Kelsey, and maybe you can help me on Nathan. Heath Kelsey was a master and PhD student here in environmental health sciences. He was the first person to discover that pets were the major source of bacteria causing shellfish bed closures in the coastal zone of South Carolina. A surprise to everyone, including us. And from there, he went on to do a PhD looking at things like golf courses and other sources of pollution, looking at more of the molecular end of things for bacterial source modeling and things to link bacterial pollution. He then, after graduation, went up and worked for a number of years at the Cooperative Oxford Lab, and then from there transitioned over to the University of Maryland, and has been there ever since. He has worked to produce the Chesapeake Bay report card, among other many unique things that Heath does. And I have to say, Heath is just one of my favorite people. I can remember putting together fecal coliform budgets for Merle's Inlet, Heath, and identifying, gosh, you mean people are only doing 3%, and we just built a new sewage treatment plant to fix this problem instead of cleaning up behind the dogs. Oh well. So anyway, so glad to have Heath, and of course Heath's been a huge part of the Community Engagement Corps. Along with Nathan Miller, they provided some unbelievable training to us for all of our scientists. We're, I think, the only center that did this kind of research translational training. You know, you just can't go talk about molecular parts of things or toxicological parts of things. You have to know how to translate science. There is an art to it. And the training that Nathan and Heath provided to us. Dwayne, you want to jump in here and talk a little bit more about Nathan? Because I have to say, Nathan, I don't know your old back. I know you're University of Maryland as well, but I'll have to defer to Dwayne to help me fill in the blanks here.
Well, I'll defer to Dr. Kelsey then.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for that introduction, Jeff. Yeah, Nathan is a science communicator here. That's his full-time job, is to communicate science and teach folks how to communicate science. So he's been a member of our team for a number of years and has been just really kicking butt on science translation and science visualization and teaching these types of courses. He and I are currently teaching ENHS 793. I think, I don't know that I see any of the current students here with Katya. So the three of us and Dwayne are teaching this ENH 793 course, which is about stakeholder engagement and techniques in doing that. But Nathan's been invaluable in all parts of science communication, and he's been doing a really bang up job for us, including some of those trainings that you mentioned. We offer trainings for other organizations and within our own organization, the rest of the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, students and other PIs and things on how to communicate science. So he's been thinking a lot about this. He's got training in film and environmental management from Duke, the Nicholas School. And how many years has it been, Nathan, since you've been with us? Has it been 3 or 4 years now?
4 years in February.
There you go. Yeah. Good. Well, we're super happy to have Nathan with us, and he and I will be presenting together today about both community engagement stuff and with science communication. So with that, Nathan, I don't know if you heard, we have a real hard stop today at 1, so I think we should probably jump in. If I could only find the right window to share. There we go. So I'm going to start out talking a little bit about there. Are you guys seeing the correct screen?
Yeah, we got the
Yes, sir.
slide.
Good. Excellent. So I'm going to start talking about the community engagement part of the science. So how do we engage communities in science? Dr. Porter asked us to kind of talk a little bit about how we came to acquire the techniques that we use all the time, because we use all these tricks and activities and things that we've just kind of picked up along the way. So he was really curious about how we kind of developed those techniques and skills to work with stakeholders. So I'll talk about the community engagement part of it, and then mixed in there will be some stuff from Nathan about science communication, and both of which are really necessary for communicating with local stakeholders and communities. To start off, though, it's like I need to kind of acknowledge that this is becoming more important. Major funders are starting to emphasize more and more the partnership, team science, and engaging people outside of science in order to get the results that we need to solve really important scientific and societal problems. So within NSF, there's a new directorate for technology, innovation, and partnership, which touches on this. I have to say also that NSF drives me a little crazy. Apparently they don't believe in the Oxford comma. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knows that. That really bothers me. Anyway, there's this idea of convergence research, and that's something that they're pressing. And it's really about addressing these really important societal, economic, and translational kind of projects to make sure that they're applied and are helpful to society. And that's through this new directorate and this focus on convergence research, and also through the Belmont Forum, which I'll talk about in a moment. NIH is also really focusing on this more and more also. There's the Transdisciplinary Collaborative Centers, there's the Transdisciplinary Tobacco Use Research Center, and the research on energetics and cancer, all of which focus on transdisciplinary science. Transdisciplinary science is that it is recognizing that we need to move beyond just multidisciplinary, where scientists from different disciplines are talking to each other. We also need to extend that to groups and communities outside of academia, so that we get important perspectives and buy-in and things like that that are only possible if you engage, or in some cases only possible if you engage folks outside of the research community. So NIH has really embraced this idea, and other foundations are embracing this idea too. And I think they've been doing that for a long time without really expressly acknowledging it. But one of the foundations that we work with currently is the Herb Family Foundation in Southeast Michigan, where we're working on a series of projects, and they fund things like jazz, Alzheimer's research, and environmental research. So they're really kind of distributed in their funding and what their interests are, but they recognize that society has to be a really important part of the decision making around environmental issues. And likewise, I look for a couple of foundations, and more of them are starting to focus on this too. The Packard Foundation also explicitly acknowledges that society and environment are inextricably linked, and so that we need to involve both of those perspectives when we talk about solutions. This is possibly best embodied in the Belmont Forum and the Belmont Challenge that kind of created the Belmont Forum. The Belmont Forum is a consortium of national level research funders. So the US participant is NSF, and for France, it's the IRD, and for For Germany, it's DFG, I think it is. So it's the national level funders, and I think there's something like 40 partners from 40 different countries. So they're national level funding organizations. They're explicitly focused on transdisciplinary research, and they recognize and they emphasize that to solve these really important questions and problems like global change and climate change, we need to involve folks from outside of academia along with the scientific researchers so that we can create this more holistic way of addressing really big challenges and in ways that are going to be relevant to communities where they're going to be feeling the impacts of these changes and problems. We've been working with the Belmont Forum for a number of years, and this is a newsletter that we produced in 2019 about how do you evaluate transdisciplinary approaches and what kind of added value does a transdisciplinary approach bring to research. So if you want to learn more about the Belmont Forum or transdisciplinary research funded by the Belmont Forum, you can go here. We've worked with them on a number of different kind of valuation projects, but also we have some funding directly from the Belmont Forum in a number of different projects as well. So why though? Why is stakeholder engagement so important? What does it bring to us? And these different funders and different conversations around transdisciplinary research all point to this idea that engaging diverse stakeholders from the very beginning in co-designing and co-creating new knowledge can lead to a number of benefits. That includes increasing a more shared understanding of the system that incorporates local knowledge, which can be really important. The people that live there and work on the water or work in that system know things about that system that we couldn't possibly know. And they have a very intricate and long history of involvement and understanding of that system in a different way than we do. By involving local stakeholders and communities, it creates buy-in to the project, and then therefore the products that come out of it. The products that you create will be more relevant to community needs because they were involved in helping to design those things. And through this process, you're also giving voice to perspectives that are often not heard or not incorporated in environmental decision-making or environmental governance. And so we want to make sure we acknowledge that. And that's really important because we want to leverage all of these benefits to begin to solve some of these really complex problems that are important to society. What do we mean by a stakeholder? A stakeholder in our definition is anybody who's affected by a project or problem or can have some influence on it. So it can be anybody with a quote unquote stake in the result. So that can be, at any different scale from the individual all the way up to societies and everything in between. And again, it's anybody who has either the power to change something within a particular problem or a project, or somebody who's going to be affected by the results of that. The Institute for the Advancement of Public Participation focuses a lot on obviously participation of the public in government decision-making. And they've identified 5 levels of stakeholder engagement, from informing, consulting, involving, collaborating with, and empowering stakeholders. And there are different goals associated with those, and then also different ways in which we interact with the community on those things. And as you move from the informing part to the empowering part, you're giving more and more power to the stakeholders to implement and decide on the final decisions. So there's this spectrum of stakeholder engagement. Maggie Carson and other students in the School of Public Health earlier this year published a paper that looks at this in the context of oceans and human health. and acknowledges that we need to be really deliberate about how we collaborate or engage with communities, and that not every project is going to be all the way to the right on the spectrum with the complete co-creation of knowledge and co-design. And it's not always the best approach depending on the project. And so we want to be really deliberate about making those connections between what we're trying to achieve and then at what level of collaboration is appropriate. And so I thought that was a really valuable addition, because, you know, as we'll see, the stakeholder engagement, when you really go all in on a co-development, co-design, and co-creation of knowledge approach, it takes a lot of time. You have to be really careful and thoughtful about how you design these projects, and it takes a lot of energy and therefore funding. Sometimes that's not necessary, and so we need to be careful about which projects we assign to that very intense collaboration part of the spectrum. So what do we, if we acknowledge that you know, meaningful stakeholder engagement is important for our particular project, and we want to get better at this, what kind of things you need to know, or what kind of skills do you need to make this work? Science communication is really essential. You have to create a message that resonates with the community outside of academia, as well as with the scientists within academia. You need good facilitation skills in order to guide those conversations. That includes things like active listening, an ability to adapt, both from a very like short timeline all the way to the project objectives. And this occurred to me very recently. I had to go all the way back to what we were even trying to achieve with the project after consultation with stakeholders. We had to really adjust all the way back there. So that ability to adapt is really important. And with that comes a little, you know, you have to cede a little bit of control. If you acknowledge that your project may be different than what you originally intended, you have to be a little bit comfortable with ceding a bit of control. And of course, that means flexibility and the ability to embrace the unknown. I mentioned we're teaching ENHS 793 now in community engaged science, and I think the students would tell you that, yeah, you know, sometimes it's a real show. We don't know what, you know, we don't necessarily know where we're going, and it can be a little bit unnerving not to know exactly what's going to come out of this. And this is typical of many stakeholder engagement projects, in that you may go into it with certain ideas on what you're going to be doing, and those may be completely moot by the time you're done, and you may be doing something a little bit different. It also struck me that most of those skills are not taught anywhere in college or in graduate school science programs. It did strike me, though, that schools of public health are probably the best place to start getting some of these things. I know that, you know, science communication, health communication, things like active listening during interview processes and things, those are things that public health students are often taught. So I think this is a really good place to build on that. And one person actually said this to me 2 weeks ago or so. They've been studying stakeholder engagement processes for 4 years, and she's never actually seen anybody try to implement it, which is shocking, but also really rewarding, because this was after the first day of a stakeholder engagement process in New Caledonia with stakeholders from local communities all the way up to government agencies in New Caledonia and Fiji, conducted in French and in English. It was a really painful meeting, very stressful, but it worked. And it was very gratifying to hear. It's like, wow, finally, I've actually seen somebody try to do this. Science communication is a big component of this, of what's necessary. And I'll let Nathan talk a little bit more about science communication and why this is so important. But we need to be able to convey those scientific concepts, the problems, the processes, and solutions in a way that's accessible to those outside of academia, those other stakeholders that we're involving in a project or process. And that can mean avoiding jargon and unnecessary terminology, which is part of the training that we talked about earlier that we provided in the School of Public Health and the Oceans and Human Health Center. And also merging those narrative elements with visual techniques. So I'm going to turn this over to Nathan, and he will talk about the importance of science communication.
So if you could actually go back to that last slide, Heath, before we get into that, my definition of science communication, because I actually wanted to piggyback off of what you said about the role of science communication in stakeholder engagement. Historically, and even as you'll see in this presentation, Ian is, I would say, predisposed to talk about science communication through the guise of product development, because that's what Ian does. Is, we, through stakeholder engagement, we work with folks to collect data, analyze data, get local knowledge and local input, so that we can develop a science communication product that informs the public and hopefully influences positive environmental policies. And what Heath is emphasizing here is that science communication isn't just about, oh yes, sorry, Ian means the Integration and Application Network. That's the name of our program. Thank you, Heath. But what Heath is mentioning here is that it's science communication isn't just about product development. It's about how do you convey your expertise and the methods through which you can collect data in a way that, and how do you kind of translate that in a way that's meaningful to someone who could find that information useful. And as he said, that requires avoiding jargon and unnecessary terminology. And it also means that, organizing your data into narratives or using visuals can kind of help that communication process as you're working with stakeholders, even before you've developed a product. Now, there are a lot of definitions about what, a lot of folks have different definitions of what science communication is. And they all kind of address different things, like, coming down from your ivory tower and talking to the public, or translating science to a general audience. But I tried to merge all of those definitions to my own, which you'll see in the next slide, which is, I kind of try to Frankenstein all those definitions into one, which is science communication is the practice of translating scientific information for any audience outside of your own personal and or professional ecosystem. And what I wanted to get at here is we normally think of science communication as scientists talking to non-scientists. But what I found in stakeholder engagement projects is that often scientists in one field of expertise have to talk to scientists in another field of expertise as well. And I think that we forget that that is also a very critical component of these stakeholder driven and transdisciplinary projects. So next slide. Normally when I think of science communication, I like to think that science communication helps engage an audience by developing products that speak to their values. So when we're working with stakeholders, the end product that we're working on to release merges science with the values of a local community so that the product is relevant to them and the product is useful to them for years and years and years. Again, that is not the only way of that science communication helps you, because you are constantly translating data for multiple audiences throughout a stakeholder-driven process. Science communication can also help improve information retention, because science communication, by its very nature, has to be, the science and this narrative has to be organized in a manner that allows your information to be easy to follow for a general audience or a targeted audience. Again, someone outside of your own ecosystem. And then it makes that information more accessible by shortening the reading time. So as opposed to reading a complicated abstract or a paper, it might be a plain language text or conceptual diagram. By shortening that reading time, you're also requiring less effort to hold that reader's attention. And you're using a language that is accessible to the audience. That could be a visual language or just plain language. Next slide. And good science communication makes you a better scientist. Envisioning the story that you want to tell with your data helps lead to comprehensive research, and it kind of helps mold this overall vision for what you want to do with your project and the work that you want to do with your stakeholders. These scientific insights can be achieved by identifying linkages either through data synthesis or visualization, combining visual elements in new ways to see how different natural phenomena or socioeconomic phenomena interact with each other. And then it helps you by integrating and comparing different data sets. And we really should say integrating and comparing different data sets as well as sets of local knowledge. Next slide. Some of the best practices for science communication, you want to consider who your target audience is. So if you're developing a product, do you want to develop a product for peers, managers, politicians, or schools? You want to determine your key messages, and that's important at any stage of a transdisciplinary project, from when you first reach out to stakeholders to having these workshops with stakeholders to identify threats, as well as the product. You want to create an outline that helps you organize your information. Again, this is important at every stage of a project. Develop visual materials to help enhance your message. And then you want to determine how to best distribute your message. And that's really important, especially at the end when you're developing a product with stakeholders. Next slide. And then the last slide that I want to talk about here is just visualizing science communication, because science and the way we present science is often so text heavy. But visualizing science is important at, again, every stage of your research or your project, because being able to visualize how different phenomena interact with each other can help clarify thinking, facilitate communication between stakeholders, and even aid your outreach and funding. If you have a visual that you can present to funders, it can possibly help you secure more funding in a renewal grant. Visualizing data can also help identify data gaps even while you're doing your analysis. It can help identify management priorities, as well as key features and threats to an ecosystem or to a community.
Thanks, Nathan. I really enjoyed looking at those things and thinking about science communication and how it benefits researchers in general, both in the ability to kind of convey your messages outside of your normal audience of people within your discipline, but also in going through, especially in the conceptual diagram phase of designing one of those things. I don't know how many times we've been working with people who said, yeah, I understand this process. And then we try and sketch it out. And they were like, oh, I thought I understood this part, but there's a missing component of here that I don't really understand, or I need to find more information on. And sometimes that leads to, new research that's been necessary. So that happens all the time. And so I think it's really valuable to try and visualize the process that you're trying to research. Anyway, I really enjoy working with science communicators on visualizing some of these things. The other components of engaging communities and people outside of academia also requires really good facilitation skills, and that encompasses lots of different things. But we really want to do, when we're working with different groups that have not worked together and don't understand each other necessarily, you want to create a space where participants feel like their input is being heard and valued equally to everyone else's. And that can be a real challenge. People feel like kind of intimidated by scientists and researchers sometimes. And we want to make sure that people understand that their knowledge is also really important and can really guide the research. So we focus on the process of bringing these people together, and a lot of time and effort goes into planning a meeting and understanding how to facilitate that meeting so that people feel that connection. And this is from this photo is from a workshop that we did in Yucatan, Mexico, in Spanish and English. It involved folks from NOAA, so federal government folks, but also participants from Cuba and Mexico. So our NOAA participants had to get pretty high level State Department permission to actually go to this meeting and talk with the folks from Cuba. So we want to make sure we get these things right, and understand that primarily we want to make sure that everyone feels like their voices and perspectives are being heard and valued. That includes fostering this atmosphere of trust and respect for others' ideas and perspectives. We want to make sure that we give opportunities for people to talk to each other that haven't been necessarily working together before, and we want to make sure we have ways for them to work together. So we get really quickly, we try and get people to work together on something with folks that they may not have worked with before. So get together the folks from Cuba and Mexico and the US on one part, in small groups, one part of the situation, or one part of coral health in this case. I know Nathan hates this picture. It's really a terrible picture. It's poor resolution, and it's backlit and all this stuff, but I really love it. This one, it says Cincinnati, but I actually have to change this. I think this is in Moline, Illinois, as part of the Mississippi River project. And the reason I like it is that we've got different things going on in different parts of the room. I don't remember exactly what we were talking about at the time, but looking at the participants, I think we were talking about transportation issues over here on the left. But it looks more like I'm talking about a fishing story or something, like the fish I caught. In the back, in the very bright light, is Bill Dennison and his group were talking about something else. And then over on the right is Bill Nuttall, another one of our science integrators, that was talking about yet another issue. And we talked these issues out, and we come back and we talked about them in plenary. And it was a really exciting meeting because it was one of the first projects where we integrated perspectives outside of ecosystem, habitat, water quality types of things, natural science focused things, to include economy and transportation and recreation and things like that. So this was one of the first meetings where we really embraced that. The other reason I like it is that our project manager from the Nature Conservancy, who provided the funding for this, is the guy standing in the middle, and he's looking at the camera like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand where you guys are going. This is really chaotic, and I really hope you guys can pull this together. And that's pretty typical as well. And so that's kind of emblematic of how these things go. There's a period in the middle there where nobody knows what's going on, but you just have to trust that at the end of it, you're going to come out with something great. So we try and create these kind of spaces for smaller groups to work together and share perspectives and then create something together. I mentioned that we focus a lot on planning and facilitation. We give a lot of thought to the agenda and the politics of things, and who should talk first and who should follow up, and make sure that everybody has equal time. And as you can see, one of the first things we do is we provide an avenue for folks to present and share their perspective. One of the things that we found is that people are unwilling sometimes to listen to someone else's perspective until and unless they're given the opportunity to share their story. It's like they have to get it off their chest, and then they can accept and respect other perspectives. So giving everybody the opportunity to share their views and their perspectives is almost a prerequisite for being able to work together and sharing perspectives and incorporating new ideas and new knowledge. In trusting and respect, we try again to foster this atmosphere where everybody feels safe to express their views. And we have lots of different activities and ways to do this so that people can share their views, even if they're not the most vocal person in the room. There are activities where people write things down and then we collect them and share them one by one. So even if somebody's not that really vocal person, they still have opportunities in different ways to share their perspectives and their priorities. And this is from a workshop that we did in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands about coral reef health with our NOAA partners. I mentioned that we get people working together on activities. This is, again, that same meeting. It's in Moline, Illinois. And I know that because that's the upper Mississippi River we're talking about. And so that was the first workshop that we did for the Mississippi River Project. And often, you get people that are sitting together with their colleagues and people that they know at a table. We just get them to turn their chairs around, and then suddenly they're working with people that they've never talked to before. And it's really rewarding and encouraging when you hear things like, wow, this is great. I've never worked with these people before. I've never even been in the same room with them before, unless our attorneys are present and we're kind of pointing fingers at each other. So being able to work together on something and create something together is really important. And that's a focus that we try to incorporate into all of our meetings, because it really does foster that sense of collaboration and trust. So the big question is, if we're not teaching this stuff to our students and our scientists at any career stage, how did we learn to do this stuff? How did this happen? And it really kind of happened organically. Our objectives and what we were trying to achieve kind of broadened, and we got a little more ambitious, and our partners were teaching us stuff, but really it just came down to just practicing stuff that we're picking up. Say, oh, this seems like a good way to go, and organize this meeting, and we try it. It's like, well, that really didn't work for this reason, and we just evolved that. So a lot of practice, trial and error, and that of course includes times when you just fail. It's like, oh, well, that completely didn't work. And that can be in the middle of a meeting. We'll have to just back up and adjust and go in a different direction. Or it can be, a whole part of a project that just didn't work. We needed to do things a little bit differently, either next time, or if we have time to do it now, let's adjust. Our part of this evolution has been around our scope of the information and the kind of projects that we undertake. In the beginning, the first report card that we worked on in the United States is actually before my time. So Bill Dennison, who's my boss, and other folks created the Chesapeake Bay Report Card, which is still our flagship project. And at the time, we were focused on habitat, biota, and water quality. Those are the things that are important for ecosystem health in Chesapeake Bay that fit our objective. We wanted to create a communication tool that quickly conveyed that information and provided some accountability for how we're doing. And so our stakeholder engagement was extensive. There were a lot of people involved, but they were mostly from the science and management communities. And so we really just wanted to make sure that the information that we were getting and had access to and were conveying was correct. But as I said, our mission and our objectives for our assessments kind of evolved over time. As I said earlier, the Mississippi River Watershed Report Card, the first one came out in 2015, and the second one came out 2 years ago in 2020. And we're still working with the group, the America's Watershed Initiative, in creating and advancing this. But it was the first project where we really branched out away from not just water quality and ecosystem health, but to include societally relevant things or additional societally relevant things like flood control, recreation, transportation, economy, and water supply, all of which are hugely important for managing the Mississippi River. We're not just managing for one of those things, we're managing for all of those things simultaneously, and we needed to recognize that. And so that was a real challenge. It was a really rewarding experience, but it also created a need for us to adjust the way that we were conducting ourselves and our projects. We also started working with additional partners. The TNC connection led to a connection with World Wildlife Fund. So WWF and the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science have been working for a number of years. I don't even remember, I think since 2013 or 14. The Orinoco River in Colombia, South America was the first project that we worked on together. And again, it branched out from an ecosystem or natural science-based focus to include biodiversity and ecosystems, yes, but also management and governance, economy, people and culture. And water was its own dimension, different parts of water, water quantity, flow dynamics, and water quality, both for drinking water and ecosystem health, were all included as potential indicators and topics of interest. Our work with our partners has just taught us so much, because working with WWF, they work in the community a lot, and so I think that they've got a lot to offer. They taught us this this game or this activity called SNAP, which we've done in class, and we've done Katya and I and Nathan did this with the Merle's Inlet folks in a project there a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be continuing that this afternoon, as a matter of fact. But it's a way of understanding what everybody's priorities are, what they find valuable in the system, and what things they think are impacting that. We also use activities like participatory mapping, again, working in small groups with people that you might not know. And this is from the Yucatan coastal report card that we worked on with the University of Mexico, where people started to illustrate where things were important, where resources were, where activities were happening, and where certain things were impacting and creating problems along the coast. Again, this is the Upper Mississippi River, and that was in Moline, Illinois, 2013. And so this is a result, one of the results of that Mississippi River project. It was a very large area, lots of interconnected pieces, lots of stakeholder engagement. We had somewhere between 700 and 800 participants in that process. And we created something that was delivered to Congress, an action agenda for the Upper Mississippi River. And this is us in January of 2017, presenting this to Congressperson Sherry Bustos in the region. So that was really rewarding. And, we consider that, kind of an illustration of impact. Again, the Kafue River in Zambia was another one, created something really relevant to local issues. Had lots of engagement from very local interests, and we had stakeholder meetings that continued even past the end of the project, which is really great. Lots of interests represented, including very local interests. On the coast of India, another instance where we included local stakeholders. They provided really important knowledge that helped us understand the system a lot better. Particularly about salinity regimes and things that we didn't understand before. Another case study in Darwin Harbour, where traditional owners, the Aboriginal community there that has lived there for tens of thousands of years, is normally not included or even consulted in environmental decision-making in the region. They're just kind of told after the fact what's happening or what's going to happen. They were just incredibly grateful to be included in the process. Like, wow, we've never actually been consulted on this stuff. It's great to be involved in this from the beginning. And they, again, provided really critical knowledge that we may have missed if not for their involvement. One of the more recent things that we've done are creating kind of listening sessions. This is one that we did for the Patuxent River in Maryland, which is part of the Chesapeake Bay. And that guy bent over there is actually my dad, who showed up for one of these meetings, which was really cool. They live on the Patuxent River. And we ask people walk through this process of, why should you care about this stuff that's going on? How are we doing now? where do we go, and are you interested in participating further? We do a visioning program. This is actually one that was done for the Potomac River. So what is your ideal Potomac River basin look like, and what can be done to get us there? And this is a virtual exercise in a different method. So I'm going to turn it back over to Nathan really quickly. I know we're getting a little bit short on time. I want to make sure we have time for questions and stuff. So I'll turn it over to you, Nathan, to talk about how our science communication has evolved a little bit.
Yeah. So as you know, as Heath mentioned, when we first started performing science communication, it was really science communication geared towards educating the public about the ecological condition of habitats, specifically the Chesapeake Bay, where where several UMCES labs are based. The first report card was released in 2006, and while there are visual elements that are in the report card and the text is presented in an organized manner, we have kind of updated our aesthetics quite a bit. Now, this was a very effective piece of science communication because I think only Chesapeake Bay Foundation had done a report card like this up until then. And because of the success of this first 2006 report card, we've been able to do one every successive year since then. If you want to go to the next slide, Heath, show you how we've updated our report cards. We've expanded not only the breadth of indicators that help us assess the health of the Chesapeake Bay, because now we are looking into socioeconomic indicators. We are also we also expanded the area that we use to develop the report card. Now we are looking at the entire watershed of the Chesapeake to assess that health. And the tools that we've used to visualize those these assessments have become more sophisticated. We've been able to, we've invested a substantial amount of time and energy and money into GIS and mapping softwares that we can then export into the Adobe Creative Cloud, where we can clean them up and color code various regions so that folks can know the health of the specific sub-regions of the watershed and then sub-regions in the bay itself. And we've gotten a lot better at developing icons as well that folks can associate with each one of these indicators, so that there's a quick visual recognition that allows folks to make that text a little bit more easily digestible. If you want to go to the next slide. The other thing that allows us to develop kind of this visual language of science communication is that we've developed a wide array of symbols and base templates to build visualizations and diagrams. And we've come a long way in developing in our skill to develop these symbols. The turtle that you see on the left is one of the first turtles that we developed in the symbol library. And then once Ian started bringing on folks who either had a background in digital art, graphic arts, or you know, kind of threw all the science communicators through the ringer to make sure that they were all up to, you know, so they were all had a standard quality control. We've been able to put time and effort into an explosion of symbols. Now, mind you, we have we don't have we don't have 1 million symbols for every kind of one species. It's you know, I think turtle is kind of unusual for us in the library in the sense that like we've got like 10 different examples, but we've got about what 3,000 symbols that are available, and they range from humans and human infrastructure to plants, biota, corals, bacteria, phenomena, interactions, all that sort of stuff. Next slide. And because we've gained more experience in science communication and the development of conceptual diagrams and visualizations, we've been able to really expand we've been able to improve the resolution and the detail that goes into our diagram development as well. Next slide.
Thanks, Nathan. I really love looking at those things and going back and looking at some of the old ones are really illustrative too, and understanding how far we've come. But again, this has been on-the-job training for most of the science communicators. They have some graphic art skills and they have environmental science understanding, but putting that together and creating these visual elements is something that they learn on the job, and it's really important. I think we need to teach that more. So to kind of review what we talked about the emphasis that's being placed on involving stakeholders in research, the recognition that engaging diverse stakeholders is necessary for some of these really complex societal problems. And being able to solve those, but also that it requires skills like science communication, facilitation, and really intense planning that are not normally taught in most programs. And we need to provide those opportunities for new scientists to learn those techniques so that they can be as effective as they can be. It's not for everyone. It's probably not something that every scientist needs to learn. Although I would kind of disagree with that. I think it would help almost every scientist to understand these techniques, but they're going to be more or less useful depending on where your career goes. But anyway, I need to stop so that we can answer any questions. I wish we'd left a little bit more time for that, but I talk a lot. So here's some research or some resources that we can share. And there are others. I'll put a link to the symbol library that Nathan talked about as well. And if you have any questions we don't get to, feel free to either give us a call or send us an email at these addresses. So with that, I will shut up now and see if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Nathan. So to start off with, Louisa, in response to your email, the answer is yes. Please reach out to Nathan. And I'm going to turn the table a bit. Dr. Kilpatrick, you've got a pretty busy end of the week. Yeah. And you're going to be doing a lot of what Dr. Kelsey and Nathan discussed here. Anything will resonate with you?
Maybe I should get on camera. I really like the slide about being okay if things don't go your way. And there was a list of other handful of bullet points, but that the work we're doing with some of our environmental justice communities here in South Carolina to do hazard assessments and vulnerability assessments. We have specific deliverables to accomplish, but a number of our meetings, we haven't accomplished those assessments as I pictured them. But I think the relationship behind that has been more important, and we've gotten the deliverable done after the fact. But I think it's the relationship that is long-standing, and that's what's going to be sustainable. So that slide really resonated with me and was a good reminder, because this weekend we have another assessment set that we're doing, and it may not all get done, and I think that'll be okay. So that was a real good point. So thank you, Dr. Kelsey, for sharing that.
Thank you, Dr. Kilpatrick. And a quick belated welcome to Mr. DeVoe.
Yeah, Rick, welcome.
Our somewhat recently retired executive director of our South Carolina Sea Grant Consortium.
Hello, Dwayne. How are you? How is everyone?
Oh, just great, Rick. And talk about someone who spent more time listening than probably anybody I know on coastal issues. Rick was a master at doing engaging the public.
Well, I may be good at listening, but sometimes I'm not good at hearing, so. So I think one of the lessons I learned was you got to do both. And you got to sort of, and I really appreciate the presentation today. Thanks very much. That's why I was on here, because I'm really, of course, very interested in communication of information. But we have to make sure that we understand our audience and how they receive information, as well as how we provide it to them. I mean, well, the only way we can provide it to them is in a way that they can receive it. So you may have alluded to that sometimes during your presentation. I'm sorry, but I would like to reiterate that if you have, because our audiences receive information in different ways. If we're trying to convey certain topics or try to understand what they are interested in, we need to know how they speak, how they use language, what they're, what sets them off, so to speak, in terms of interest and that sort of thing. So just offer that little tidbit of observation on my end.
And Rick, I mean, we try and make as many accommodations as that for that as possible. I mean,
Sure.
it even comes down to color schemes that we use in
Sure.
conceptual diagram design, because we know that, while, certain colors have a certain significance to us and our backgrounds, that might not be the case for the stakeholders that we're working with. So,
You bet.
how do we, it comes down to even questions like, how do we use a color scheme to make sure that what we're going to be visualizing is representative of a population? And
I'm very impressed with the diversity, not the diversity, but the sort of how international your activities have been or are, and that sort of underscores my point, which is you guys have to do that, and I use guys in a very general way. So, but you have to be able to do that, because you're going into these environments which are completely different culturally and socially than we're used to, that is so important. It's the how is almost as important as the what when it comes to sharing information.
Yeah, that's a really important point, and an illustration of that just happened to me the other week, where I was in New Caledonia, and we're talking about creating a product that can reach local communities, and we had to ask the mayors of local indigenous communities how people receive their information. And I had an understanding that radio and television was a big way that people received information. He said, absolutely not. They said, people don't pay attention to that stuff anymore. Everyone's on their phone, and they're looking at videos on YouTube, or they have another app that's popular in the Pacific region. And so you really have to be flexible about how people receive their information and what's going to resonate. And that's a really important reason why you want to engage people in the process of designing these things. They're going to tell you stuff like that there's no way you would know.
And Dr. Scott, you get the last word here.
Okay, well, I just wanted to make a comment. Last week we heard from Lacey, and I was really impressed with Lacey's word clouds, where she, in her assessments of farmers, she picked out these big words that mean the most to the most people. I just wondered, Heath, do y'all ever do anything like that when you do your pasties, to do the word clouds? Because it seems like, boy, that is a cool way to really bring it all together, is what Lacey was showing last week. And maybe y'all do that. It just struck me, boy, that's cool.
We do that all the time. That's
Good.
a great way to summarize that kind of information. Yeah.
Well, that's terrific, because that was the first time I'd actually seen a word cloud like that, Lacey. I was really struck by that, and I can see how that's so useful. So thank y'all so much. This was terrific.
And folks, I hate to bring it to a close, but we are up against the 1 o'clock bewitching hour. So a final round of applause for our speaker.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. That was really fun. And
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Rick, thank you for joining us today.
Yes,
too.
thank you, Rick.
No
it's good to
problem.
talk to you again,
My
Rick.
pleasure. I hope I'm retired, so I'm trying not to do work anymore, but that's impossible.
Come join us anytime, Rick. These seminars are so enlightening. I have to tell you, I learn something new every day.
Very good. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
All
Good
right,
to talk to you again, Rick.
Folks, enjoy the rest of the week.
Thanks, Heath. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Coffee. I'll see you guys in a couple hours.
Yep. Sounds good.
And everyone else, enjoy the rest of the day, rest of the week.